when I first heard about the abandoned Lingxi Mine, nestled deep within the mountains of northern China. I was captivated. The stories were too enticing to ignore. Whispers of the mine being cursed, tales of miners who vanished without a trace, and eerie sounds that echoed through its dark, twisting tunnels. As a writer with a penchant for the supernatural, I felt compelled to explore the haunting depths of Lingxi Mine. I arrived at the small village near the base of the mountains under a shroud of mist. The villagers, wary-eyed and superstitious, warned me against venturing into the mine. Their words were laced with fear, and one elderly woman even clutched a small talisman, pressing it into my hand. "For protection," she whispered, her eyes wide with a dread I couldn't fathom. Armed with nothing but a flashlight, a camera, and a growing sense of unease, I set off for the mine. The entrance loomed ahead, a gaping maw in the rock, as though the mountain itself was waiting to swallow me whole. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside. The air was cold and damp, heavy with the scent of earth and decay. My flashlight flickered, casting long shadows that danced along the walls. Each step I took echoed, a solitary sound in the oppressive silence. I tried to steady my nerves, reminding myself that there was nothing here but old stone and rusted equipment. A few hundred meters in, I stumbled upon the remnants of an old mining cart. Its wheels were rusted, and the wood was rotting, but it was a stark reminder of the men who once toiled here. I took a photo, the flash briefly illuminating the darkness before everything returned to black. The silence was suddenly shattered by a low moan. It started faint, like a whisper, but rose and fell in an unsettling melody. My heart raced, and I spun around, the beam of my flashlight tracing the walls frantically. There was nothing, only emptiness. I pressed on, the moaning now a constant companion. It seemed to come from all around me, reverberating through the narrow tunnels. I told myself it was just the wind, a trick of the acoustics, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. The deeper I ventured, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. I could feel the weight of the mountain pressing down, as if the very rocks were alive, watching, waiting. My flashlight flickered again, casting a brief shadow against the wall that seemed to move of its own accord. I shook it off as my imagination, a product of the mine's eerie allure. Suddenly, I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, echoing in the darkness. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they seemed to be right behind me. I spun around, my flashlight piercing the void, but there was nothing. Panic gripped me, and I stumbled backwards, my mind racing. The stories of vanishing miners clawed at the edges of my sanity. Were they still here, trapped in the mine's depths, waiting for another soul to claim? I turned to leave, but the path seemed different, unfamiliar. Had I taken a wrong turn? The tunnels twisted and turned, each passage identical to the last. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat urging me to escape. Then I saw it, a figure standing at the edge of my flashlight's reach. It was a man, or at least what had once been a man. His face was gaunt, eyes hollow and lifeless. He wore tattered clothes, barely more than rags, and his skin was unnaturally pale. He raised a hand, gesturing for me to follow. Against every instinct, I found myself compelled to obey. As I approached, he turned and began walking deeper into the mine. I followed, my feet moving of their own accord. The moaning grew louder, almost deafening. Shadows danced around us, shapes that seemed to writhe and twist, reaching out with invisible hands. My companion led me through a series of tunnels, each one darker and narrower than the last. Finally, we reached a chamber, larger than the others. The walls were lined with strange symbols etched into the stone, glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. In the center of the room lay a pit, a yawning chasm that seemed to stretch into infinity. The figure turned to me, his hollow eyes meeting mine. A chill ran down my spine as he spoke, his voice a rasping whisper, barely audible over the moaning. "This is the heart of the mine," he said, gesturing to the pit. "It hungers." Suddenly, I understood. The mine was alive, a malevolent force that consumed those who dared to venture too deep. The stories were true, all of them. Desperation clawed at my mind, and I turned to flee, but the figure's hand shot out, grasping my arm with an iron grip. I struggled, but his strength was inhuman, unyielding. The last thing I remember is being pulled towards the pit, my screams swallowed by the darkness, the mine's eternal depths welcoming me into its cold embrace. Have you uncovered the hidden object for what haunts the next video? Thank you for listening. We'll be waiting for you again very soon.